All right, good afternoon. This is Sean Roche with the GAFM NAI Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 10th in a series of GAFM NAI Committee-sponsored Lunch and Learn webinars. We've obtained permission from ASFPM to award one continuing education credit for today's presentation. In order for those in attendance to capture your information and submit that, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and submit a chat with your name, organization, and whether or not you're a CFM, and we'll use that list to confirm actually who's on the phone for the presentation today and forward that to make sure you get your CEC credit for attending today's webinar. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Please put your phones on mute so that we don't hear background noise during the presentation. And also, don't put the call on hold. If you need to take another call, please hang up and dial back in. That way we won't hear the music if your phone system has that. So today's presentation is the mitigation policy issues in the New Jersey area following Hurricane Sandy. I'll be introducing our speaker in just a few minutes. We'll ask to hold all questions during his presentation, and we'll have time for questions afterward. And then we'll preview a few of the upcoming topics to close out our call and answer any logistical type questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. John, if you want to start sharing, I'll go ahead and do your introduction. Our speaker is John Miller. He's with he's an associate with Water Resources with Princeton Hydro LLC, and has been with the Legislative Committee Chair for the New Jersey Association of Floodplain Management since 2007, and is a past chair and a founder of this chapter of the Association of State Floodplain Managers. As Legislative Committee Chair, he worked to increase the profile of the organization and represented NJAFM on public positions of the organization, most recently in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. He's represented NJAFM on two Governor of New Jersey appointed bodies, the New Jersey Mitigation Task Force and the Passaic River Basin Flood Advisory Commission. Serving on the board of ASFPM as a regional director between 2006 and 2009, he has continued his involvement with ASFPM staff and leadership on national policy and representation on Capitol Hill. He's received the 2006 NJAFM Founders Award, the 2008 NJAWRA President's Award, and the 2010 NJAFM Floodplain Management Leadership Award. Other volunteer efforts recognized publicly by municipal resolution in 2010 are the City of Lambertville, where he lives and serves on the Planning Board, the Emergency Management Council, and is the Community Rating System Coordinator. With that, John, I don't see your presentation yet. If you want to go ahead and begin sharing your desktop.
Yeah, Sean, I think you need to, I don't have that as an option right now, so I think you need to.
Okay, let me change your role, sorry.
Okay.
Here we go.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, that should be it.
One more quick thing I'll mention briefly is if for some reason you're not able to get into the WebEx for one reason or another, I send an email out to all participants with a PDF of today's presentation so you could follow along using that. If for some reason that PDF attachment did not come through on the email, there's a link to the GAFM website where the PDF is posted there. So you have a couple of different options for viewing the slides if for some reason you're having problems with the WebEx today. Thanks, John. Go ahead.
Okay, Sean. Well, I really appreciate everyone joining us today. for lunchtime. You might be eating lunch, but I'll refrain from eating while I'm giving the presentation. So we're going to talk about mitigation policy following Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey, and it's been a very interesting process, and we'll go over a number of those things. So I appreciate the introduction. Once again, I'm the Legislative Committee Chair since 2007 of the New Jersey Association for Floodplain Management. So I get involved in these things and have served on a couple commissions, task force, and basically there's a lot I've learned, and the association has learned over time. I guess really an important element of what happened after Sandy is what happened before Sandy. Since 2004, New Jersey has had a presidential disaster declaration related to flooding. We've had other ones, winter storms, but we've had flooding every single year at least once since 2004. And the only exception to that was 2008 was the only quiet year, I guess you'd say. We've had two separate events in 2004. We had 4 separate presidential disaster declarations in 2011. So we are definitely very flood prone, and you'll see the NFIP statistics I give later in the presentation on just where we are with in the nation on flood insurance claims paid dollars. So causes of New Jersey flooding, I think that's important to understand. We do get heavy precipitation. You can see the events I list here, 2004, 2005, 6, twice in 11. We definitely are a very urbanized state. We have the highest density in the nation per capita, and we have very urbanized areas that lead to localized flooding. We have inadequate conveyance. We have a number of combined sewer systems in especially Hudson County, New Jersey, across from Manhattan, New York, that are very susceptible to overflows. We have heavy rains that cause dam failures. Actually, it was a Burlington County event in July of 2004 that our state chapter got started after that event. It was that event that got us thinking about we really need a chapter. And like I say, every year since, except for 2008, we've had a major disaster that was declared that said basically local and state response needed to be enhanced by federal. We also have high tides. We have a number of areas along the New Jersey coast that now a full moon, a lunar tide, will cause flooding to areas, and I can name a couple of those. One is very evident is around Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is it's a little more southern than mid-coast New Jersey, if you want to try to visualize that. We also have coastal storm events. So we have 2007 listed here, which was a nor'easter. We also had nor'easters after Sandy, which I don't go into here, but were definitely susceptible. And even because of Sandy changing some landforms, we are even additionally vulnerable to coastal events and nor'easters along the Jersey coast. And I want to point out that these are all natural processes. Probably, urbanization is probably your least so, but of course the rainfall is a natural process. So I just wanted to point that out. This governor, Governor Christie, after flood events in 2007 and 2010 on the Passaic River Basin, formed or issued an executive order forming a flood advisory commission for that basin. I had the honor to be on that. There were 4 commission members, and we basically, again, looked at the events of 2007 and 2010. Once again, this is significant in terms of what's leading up to Hurricane Sandy, so this is before that. And the commission reported to the governor in January 2011. We made a number of recommendations, which you'll see on the next slides. Again, the significance is the difference between this and Hurricane Sandy. And then, but we actually went back to a 1903 Commission report in this basin that said many of the same things that we said in our report, and you can, I guess, learn from the past or learn from what wasn't learned from the past. And here's some of the recommendations, or here are the recommendations that our commission made. I want to give this a little context, and I won't go into this in detail. I'd certainly be happy to provide anyone details, and I have a whole presentation on the commission. But this is an area where there's a huge, I should call it a monumental Army Corps of Engineers project to install a tunnel. And when I say a tunnel, it would be 20 miles in length, in excess of 20 miles in length. It would be a 45-foot diameter tunnel boring machine. There would probably be somewhere like 7 of these things. The final diameter was 42 feet, so you could fit 4 lanes of traffic in this tunnel, and that was to divert water from basically where the Passaic River starts, where the Pompton River ends, and where the Passaic River starts. It's the Pequannock River and the Pompton River become the Passaic River, if that can get more confusing. But that's where the entrance of the tunnel would be, and then shoot down to the Hudson River or Hudson Bay, and that's where the outlet would be. So this was a monumental project. I did some figuring, looking at the plans and such, that this would have had more material removal than the channel between France and England. So this was a worldwide large project. It would have, and the channel is on the list of the 7 modern wonders of the world. So it was that large of a project. So keep in mind that was the context of this commission forming, and we came out of our hearings and deliberations and our discussions saying, you know, that's not really the way we want to go, and we really think that buyouts, voluntary buyouts for the most chronic susceptible areas is really the right way to go. And that's what we put down as our first recommendation, and we made other recommendations such as elevations where acquisition, and keep in mind a lot of elected officials are concerned about their tax base, their ratables in terms of buyouts, and we've made some progress in terms of that understanding. We also talk about the Corps was buying up flood-prone areas for flood storage. We recommended that continue. We wanted to look at this installation. It was a retrofit of an existing dam. That's number 4. I just want to say I crossed off number 5. I wasn't a big fan of this, and that's why it's crossed off. However, it was a commission recommendation of basically going into the river and removing, not at just at crossings and obstructions, but actually doing channel work. And again, I won't go into that too much, but that's something I'm skeptical about. Anyway, we had some feeder dams. They were low head dams that were recommended to look at for removal. We had the state never adopted the NFIP. The state itself, we certainly have many communities. 92%, if I remember off the top of my head, of New Jersey communities are in the NFIP. So it's a very high subscription rate. But the state itself is not in all cases consistent with the NFIP, and that was one of our recommendations, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Expedited permitting process to remove, again, certain obstructions at crossings, and then beefing up some of the emergency management efforts, plans, and also the warning system, and then finally wrapping up our recommendations. Inundation mapping, how important that is, especially in these very urbanized areas, that we interact more with the public and have more outreach. We wanted the Corps to go back and look at their comprehensive plan, which the big player in that was the tunnel, and we wanted them to just go back and basically look at the benefit cost analysis again and give some feedback on that. Keep in mind that we did have some people on the commission. There was one member especially that was very much in favor of the tunnel, and I think continues to be in favor of the tunnel project. And that was, you know, when you're in a group, sometimes you make compromises as far as what the recommendations are. But looking at risk mapping and getting in, and that's certainly been done since the storm. And then this is something the 1903 Commission had said is a moratorium on development in the floodplain, and of course that never happened, and we don't expect that happening now. It was a recommendation that towns should look at their risk and look at their vulnerability before going forward with more land development. So, all right, so we have that, and remember that the previous slide, I'll go back to that slide actually, that we had after the commission reporting in 2011, January, we had major flooding in March of 2011, and then again in August, September of 2011, we had record flooding of this basin. So the commission report is issued. So you've now had 4 events in this watershed. What was happening here was more demand was being seen by the public for voluntary buyouts. You were having all of basically hazard mitigation money, FEMA mitigation programs taking care of buyouts. And again, the demand went from very little demand before the 2007 timeframe to extreme demand and much more demand than we had money for in you know, after these flood events. So everything was really going toward buyouts and reducing risk and eliminating certain risk in certain towns. Very successful program. And then Sandy came along. Hurricane Sandy, and people are calling it the big one or the storm of the century. Some people are calling, you know, a lot of people refer to it as Superstorm Sandy. And I avoid that because I don't want people to think it was the big one or the storm of the century. We don't know that at this point. I keep calling it Hurricane Sandy because I'm trying to get people to realize that this could happen again. So anyway, here's a graphic of Sandy off the coast. It did make landfall very close to Atlantic City, New Jersey. And for reference on damages, it pretty much things south of Atlantic City, New Jersey, fared pretty well, and it in many cases was not the record storm on the coast. 1962 was a nor'easter that had that persisted through 5 high tide cycles, and is still the record event again for the southern part of the New Jersey shore. Atlantic City going north, for the most part, Sandy is the record storm now. Sandy lasted through 3 high tide cycles. It did make landfall at high tide, and that exacerbated damages. And again, going from Atlantic City north into northern New Jersey, certainly going into the state of New York, coastal areas, Long Island, places like that, Sandy did its biggest damage. I wanted to show this slide, and this is something that I could spend some time on, and I won't, but this pretty much shows the inundation limits of Hurricane Sandy. And what you can see here is pre-2009 is the yellow outline of the floodplain. There was a lot of outrage when a levee-like structure, and this is Monmouth County, right here, a portion of Monmouth County, and there was a levee-like structure that was not certified. 4,000 people got added to the floodplain. There was a lot of outrage, and actually the county sued FEMA. The judge threw it out. Long story short, the mapping, the new mapping after 2009 is in the orange color, and you can see that much of the area that would not have been in the floodplain prior to 2009 was designated in the special flood hazard area when Sandy hit. And again, it's rough. This is using high watermarks to generate this particular figure. But the blue area is the inundated area from Sandy. I wanted to point out that New Jersey is not just a coastal state. It's also very urbanized, as I talked about before, a very dense state. This is the city of Hoboken. What you can see here is to the right is and I'm using an old Fermet here. I'm not using the latest mapping. But you can see on the right is the Hudson River. Across from that, of course, is Manhattan, and then you can see this landform. Well, it's an island when it floods. There were a lot of areas in the southwest portion of Hoboken that are filled wetlands, and you can pretty much see it becomes an island during flood conditions. And that plays out, of course. This firehouse is in the southwest area of Hoboken. I took we were calling it the shore tour, David Conrad and I drove from Hoboken over 2 days down to Atlantic City. I think David took something like 450 photographs. I was doing the driving, so most of these photographs that I have labeled David Conrad are all of those photographs are the two of us driving down the coast. But you can see this critical facility, one of the firehouses that, and you can see, and I don't think this was at the time of high water, but you can not only see the flood waters, but you can see the sheen from petroleum products in the water there. This is also a town with combined sewers, so you certainly had sewage mixed in with all this flooding. Really a mess. And Hoboken's really a challenging place because of it has a number of garden apartments and other type of structures that date back quite far, and they're really challenged with their mitigation actions. Again, I can provide more information if anyone wants that. Let me take you down the coast now. This is Monmouth County. This is Leonardo, which is on the Bay Shore and the Raritan Bay Shore, and this is a house that I saw in November, 3 weeks after the storm, and I saw this photo was taken in March of this year. And the only difference in this structure between November and then March is the fire alarm wasn't going off, and I think it was a smoke alarm that basically had a battery that wanted a new battery, and I guess that eventually wore off. But this structure had very little change in that time period, and I don't know what it looks right now, but the entire first floor was just knocked out. You could see in places on the first floor, you could see right through the home. So it was a very dramatic home. And again, this is V-zone. This is wave action. This is the damage that causes that. This one, this photo is from Highlands. You get a chuckle out of it, but this was the Inlet Cafe, and it's saying open sooner or later. One photo I should have included, and I think about it now, but right to the right of this shot is it's called the Wind and Sea, and it's a restaurant that there's a really good 3-minute clip. I believe FEMA has it on their website, but it talks about the owners complaining about having to meet substantial improvement standards and putting, elevating and putting in an elevator and those type of things. They come back later in that presentation and say, gosh, we are so glad we did these retrofits, that we did mitigate. We were open immediately after Sandy. We've actually seen business improve because people that are disabled people that have trouble getting into some restaurants because of stairs and whatnot actually come to their restaurant because it's so accessible. And there's a really good story here of kind of this Inlet Cafe, and across from it is the Wind and Sea. But anyway, this is kind of a double message. The Inlet Cafe, it's kind of like, well, will the inlet open sooner or later, or is it the Inlet Cafe? So anyway, this is, you're going to see a number of photos here from Seabright, and I'm going to shoot through these pretty quickly so I don't take too much time. But this is where you have a seawall on the left-hand side of the picture. The seawall got overtopped and really took out buildings. And you can see this is, it kind of like they have cabanas down there. They're more or less efficiencies that people own, and they basically spend most of their time on the beach. And and then have their place to stay overnight and to cook. You can see right in the kitchen of this one. Lots of notices from code officials not to reoccupy, not to re-electrify, and those type of things. Again, this was this particular photo was taken in November of 2012. But going along here, again, more 2012 November shots. This house was just completely knocked off its foundation. These homes were not built for V-zone standards. So you have a wall, and you basically have very vulnerable block buildings, and you can see the CMUs right there. Again, foundations were undermined. You have a lot of masonry foundations that were just cracking. And you can see parts of the seawall that got pushed. The top of the seawall had a slab on top that got knocked off. It was, basically a boardwalk of such, but up on a seawall. Here's a house that looks like it even. The siding got taken off of this house from the high winds. You can see this stand in the front that's recently installed, and that was basically between Sandy and the next nor'easter, which happened very shortly after there was some sand brought in to try to stabilize the area. So let me show you, I'm going to show you some more photographs, but again, I wanted to sort of bring this up that New Jersey now has become the third in the nation on flood insurance claim paid dollars since 1978. And we're really, this number just keeps growing. This is a number from May, late May of this year, and I keep checking that late May number, and it keeps getting updated. We just gained another $200 million since the last time I checked the May number, and we're only $300 million behind Texas now. So I used to say that New Jersey was number one outside of the Gulf Coast states. Now we're really you can't say that anymore. We're high when you for any location in the U.S. And just to keep in mind that Louisiana is kind of in its own world. It's 16. I think it's 16.4, 16.6 billion dollars of NFIP dollars. So Texas is our next. Hopefully we won't get there, but Texas is the next stop for us. Once again, some photographs David Conrad and I took on the way down the coast. This was Asbury Park. Did fairly well in Hurricane Sandy. This boardwalk was a reinforced boardwalk. There were some repairs made, but it did pretty well. This boardwalk did not do well. This is actually Spring Lakes boardwalk. The piers that you're seeing were actually installed by the I think if I remember right, 1939 during the Depression and Work Progress administration. This is going to be some of your worst areas hit on the Jersey coast, and again, this is Manaloking. Manaloking got famous because there was a new inlet formed. The Corps of Engineers has since driven pile and filled in that area, and it is now passable. But it's where a new inlet formed, and most of Manaloking took the brunt of Hurricane Sandy and was leveled. Homes were just leveled. So here's an example of one. Here's another one. We can move on down just down the coast at Ortley Beach. So this is just below Manaloking. Again, entire blocks were just really, knocked off foundations. Houses floated. And here's another part of Ortley Beach. It's called Camp Osborne. These, again, were more of your cabins. All of these, this is another place where the ocean tried to open an inlet. It actually floated all of these cabins together. There was a fire, and this is what remains. It's basically metal parts from dishwashers and wash machines and those type of things. Once again, Ortley Beach, houses were undermined. Masonry structures really got hit hard. This is really the iconic photo of Hurricane Sandy on the Jersey coast, and this was the roller coaster off of Seaside Heights. where the pier basically fell but left the roller coaster standing in the ocean, and it was very iconic. And this has since been removed. You can also see the piers, the piles that have been driven. David Conrad and I saw them starting to rebuild the boardwalk at this point. Once again, this is Holgate. This is the southern part of Long Beach Island, if people are familiar with that. Houses were just rotated off of their foundations. This is Mystic Island. This is an area where marshes were dredged, canals were formed, homes were built on the dredge material, and this is an example of where V-Zone took out a masonry foundation, and the second floor fell on this particular house. So let's go into a little bit of the setting again, where we are and looking toward mitigation. And the mapping was for this area along the coast dates back to analysis that was performed in the 1980s. There was also work going on, a coastal restudy for all of New Jersey's coast going into Manhattan. If you want to see anything on that, it's Region 2 Coastal is the website. But basically, there was a lot already done on still water elevation modeling, but there hadn't been the wave modeling done yet. And basically, FEMA very quickly, and we're talking about a storm late October, and by mid-December, we had maps coming out that were showing advisory base flood elevations. Which was really great, and it was something, again, that hadn't had a lot of precedent except from Hurricane Sandy, but we got maps, or I should say FEMA and its contractors got maps out to people very quickly, and giving the governor incredible credit, he, by emergency rule, adopted the advisory base flood elevation map statewide. And again, they were coastal remapping. It wasn't inland remapping, but he got that basically adopted for the rebuilding process. Anything that required a state permit would have to comply with the maps. There were some towns that adopted these maps, but this was a very important move that the governor made in January, basically saying, we want you to build to these higher elevations and these zones. Let me go back a second. The zones were really the controversy, not the elevations. The V zones were, there was an approximate method used until the wave modeling could be performed. That now is resulting in what we're calling preliminary working maps in New Jersey that are becoming the best available data and replacing these ABFE maps. But anyway, long story short, a lot of people got very upset about the V zones expanding and didn't believe them, and there was a lot of political fallout. And long story short, the V zones are much reduced in the preliminary work maps. And again, it's created some issues. And again, I don't have time to go into all that. One thing that's been interesting, of course, there's been a lot of talk about sea level rise and looking at that in terms of rebuilding from Sandy. That really hasn't happened in New Jersey, and we've seen that happen. And I'll go to the next slide. New York State had 3 commissions working on response to Sandy, and the New York City just came out with its plan on how to rebuild more resilient from Sandy. You know, these plans we're looking from New Jersey up to New York and saying, wow, that, you know, some of us anyway are saying, wow, I wish we could have something like that. And again, with the precedent of a commission for the Passaic Basin, we had a commission for the Delaware River Basin. We've had hearings by the legislature. There's been fact-finding on other storms, but not for Sandy. And we get basically New Jersey stronger than the storm, which is the $25 million marketing campaign to bring people back to the coast. This is something that This is being paid for out of the Community Development Block Grant Program. $25 million is a small amount compared to the $1.83 billion coming through the CDBG program, but it's indicative of kind of there's more being spent on, in my opinion, getting back quicker and getting things back in order instead of going for resilient recovery, and we'll talk about that. So here's my outline a little bit on the CDBG. This is the first, what they call the tranche, so this is the first release of money from HUD. The Housing and Urban Development is overseeing the CDBG money. But you have homeowner assistance programs. Again, there's a REM program, that's the Reconstruction, Rehabilitation, Elevation, and Mitigation Program. You have a homeowner resettlement program, which was pretty interesting, which was giving people that didn't leave an area $10,000 if they decided that's where they would stay. And I read a little more about it. They could stay in the same county, but it's kind of an odd program as far as I'm concerned. We had rental housing and renter programs. And remember that a lot of these, especially urban areas, have a lot of renters and a lot of tenants, and that's where money was spent. There was economic revitalization, so we had grants and forgivable loans to small businesses. That's a pretty good sized program, and small business loans. We have neighborhood and community revitalization. That included even streetscape work, which again I was a bit critical of in terms of using this disaster recovery money for something that would be urban or community revitalization. But you have the tourism marketing campaign, which is what you saw in the previous slide. You have, and this is really important, is the code enforcement grant program. There's some money being spent in just making sure that things are built to code. And we do have code enforcement. All of our communities in New Jersey follow a state building code. But as far as especially floodplain issues, we still have 565 municipalities in New Jersey. Some know the NFIP, some have a local floodplain administrator that knows what they're doing, but there are many communities that still are very confused about what their role is in recovery. There's also a couple other programs, supportive services program and planning, oversight, and monitoring. What is really absent here, I think, and very important, is that we didn't have money sent to planning and to sort of thinking ahead and looking toward the future in New Jersey, and we don't have, the planning is more of an afterthought. It's something that there is now a program for Sandy-affected towns to apply for some very small planning grants, but it's now 9 months after a lot of things are already underway. It's unfortunately, planning has been kind of I believe a word. Planning was equated by some policymakers, I think, to delay, and that's very unfortunate. We also have the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. I actually got a copy of that last night for the first time. We've been trying to get our hands on this. This has been approved by FEMA Region 2, but it pretty much is doing elevations. The governor thinks that elevations are the right way to go for the most part. He is doing some acquisitions in towns like Sayreville and South River, and he's also, again, going to send some money up to the Passaic River because of the great need there and the great demand. But really, there's no money going to these coastal communities, these ones that are on barrier islands. And the reason's been given several, and some of it has to do with real estate value and the lack of demand. And I think that goes into, you know, what spurs mitigation and whether if like the Passaic Basin, we need multiple storms in a short period of time to get people to realize that voluntary acquisitions is the right way to go. There's also emergency generators, and it wasn't so in 2007. We only had 2 towns that had all hazard mitigation plans. We now have just about the entire state. I think it's 93% of the population. 20 of 21 counties have hazard mitigation plans. Again, we are a home rule state, so the county-wide plans are only so good. It's the local plans that really, and we only have a handful of those. And but anyway, Ocean County was the last county, and I believe it's about to be approved, and they do qualify for Sandy aid. So here's some of your elevations as an example of an elevation project here in Seabright. Again, Seabright was the town with the seawall that was overtopped. This one is in Spring Lake. This is a pretty good example of an elevation. And here's Holgate. So again, I want to allow some time for questions, especially. It's becoming the perfect storm in New Jersey with Sandy happening, with bigger waters, and perfect storm in terms of flood insurance increases. We're looking at the increase in annual increases, and we're also looking at certain pretty firm structures, and there's many of those in New Jersey going to actuarial. And we have, of course, the coast has many second homes and rental properties that will be seeing their rates go up significantly. We also had the advisory-based flood elevation maps that are now becoming preliminary and will become final in 2004 timeframe, so we're looking at that happening. And the zone changes is significant because we have some A-zone construction that are now becoming B-zone. So there's a whole bunch of things happening. Now, the good of that is actually that it is spurring mitigation, that a lot of homeowners are saying, hey, we want to go higher, we want to do something to mitigate, we want to reduce our future flood insurance premium. So bigger waters has had a very positive influence in the recovery from Sandy. So that's something to keep in mind. I just have this slide here. I got some numbers from Bruce Bender and basically showing the magnitude of the increases, pretty substantial. Going from an A zone when you become a B zone and you're not compliant, especially, you go up significantly. So let's go over real quickly some challenges, and then I'll turn it back over to Sean for questions. Some of the challenges in New Jersey is that New Jersey is a home rule state, so the municipalities dominate. And like I said, we have 565 municipalities. They all have their own, planning boards, zoning boards. They have their own ordinances. They have their own, basically, land use. They dominate that process, and so getting those communities to do all the right thing is very, very difficult to do. We're also the most densely populated state. We've had a lot of development very early in time, and especially in our urban and coastal areas, we have a real density of vulnerability. Also, municipal capacity. With 565 municipalities, you have a lot of small communities, and not all are rural small communities, but some of them are urban small communities. Hoboken is 1 square mile in size. You have Seabright that we looked at, again, with the seawall, has only 1,400 residents. So even your tax base is real tiny there to be able to respond to a major disaster like that. And you have a lack in some cases of floodplain administrator expertise and experience. That has been very evident in substantial damage determination. The Governor Christie, doesn't like regional authorities. So the idea that was first entertained by Governor Kane in 1988, Governor Kane of New Jersey, about having a coastal commission is not happening during this governor's administration. It won't happen. And he's been not very favorable to existing regional authorities such as the Pinelands Commission or the Highlands Commission. So this idea of planning as an afterthought is very problematic, and I think will really decide the future of New Jersey. Planning kind of rolling out very late and being very limited in doing the reconstruction. communication of vision has been missing here. I mean, we've been missing sort of the future and looking ahead. And a lot of the public hasn't been included in this. The plans have been given very quick review by the public, really not addressed. And that goes with the Community Development Block Grant Action Plan and the HMGP Plan, Administrative Plan. There's been very little public engagement. There's also the regulatory atmosphere, and sort of there's been administrative orders to say, you know, put it back the way it was, don't look at why it failed, and there's been a lot of money spent, I mean, a lot of money spent on putting things back the way they were. And then there's also special interest, which I can touch on in a second, but we're also not looking at future conditions. We do have the base flood elevation plus a foot, but we're not looking at sea level rise. We're not looking at anything that you know, even coastal erosion issues. And the Jersey Shore is such an economic engine, and that really plays a role in decision making here, and trying to get it back by Memorial Day, and try to get, you know, the vacation season, everything, you know, and not everything's back, and it's not that way, but the push to get boardwalks and other things and businesses back online. What we're finding out is many shore points are not having a successful summer, and again, that recovery after a big disaster is a monumental task. It's also an election year. It's an election year, very high profile governor, and certainly, and again, I can go into more detail with individuals, but that is definitely playing a role in everything. One thing I want to mention on the special interest, there's a pier bill right now that the legislature passed, and it's building on piers over water. It's mostly for developments on the Hudson River. It's something that our chapter has been very heavily covering and very vocal about our opposition to it. It sits on the governor's desk. He has to make a decision by August 19th. But there's a lot of special interest behind this, a lot of politics and other things that are pushing this along. And we think as a chapter this is a really poor response to a major disaster such as Sandy. But anyway, you'll hear about this pier bill, and we'll see where that goes. But I want to give some time for questions. I hope I gave you an overview. Again, mitigation is an evolving thing in New Jersey. We've been through it before. We've been very successful in the Passaic River Basin. I'd say, you know, the jury might still be out a little bit on the coast, but we're not seeing the same kind of planning. We're not seeing the same kind of, it's being treated differently, and it's being treated as, you know, it's an economic engine. People don't want to sell, and it's a vacation spot, and you know, it's just a major revenue generator for the state. So there are different policy issues going on the coast. So anyway, Sean, I'll turn it over to you if you want to strike up any questions.
Sure, John, thanks. Just send a chat out if you want to submit a question via chat. Feel free to do that. Also, everybody should be able to speak up via phone connection as well. So please, if you have any questions for John, speak up.
Do you know, did any of the substantial damage come up during the permit process? How do they evaluate them? How do they tell homeowners that they had to elevate the house? And what were some of the hard decisions or kickbacks from the citizens?
Absolutely, great question. The substantial damage determinations after Sandy was, you know, I'll use a personal thought, but it was very shoddy. There were a lot of towns that didn't know what that responsibility was. There were certainly towns that did know, but overall, we got the state got in substantial damage determinations around 7,000 to 8,000, when the belief is something like 20,000 or more were substantially damaged. FEMA had to come in, hire a contractor, and basically back-check the towns. FEMA's contractor in this case was Dewberry, and I haven't seen that they have results yet, but they were basically coming in and redoing substantial damage determinations, and I believe FEMA is going to encourage communities to accept FEMA's evaluation. So that's been very interesting. As far as, I only know anecdotally a number of towns, and actually someone that I work with has a house in a shore town, and the town went to her and said, well, do you want to be declared substantially damaged? You know, what's your call on that? So it's been very interesting that there's been, I think, a lot of compliance issues, and how that gets resolved will be very interesting. And again, I give FEMA a lot of credit in doing their cross-check of substantial damages. I've also encouraged the state to look at the tax assessors' reassessments to see when they declared something substantial. I mean, they didn't know they were doing that, but would they add to the cross-check to see how many structures should be rechecked for substantial damage? So I would say that has not been a positive message coming out of Sandy. It's been a very disappointing performance.
John, one other question we have on chat here was there any technical basis for narrowing the V zones in the preliminary work maps post-Sandy?
Yes. Going from what we had that had 1980s information, so those were the effective maps. December and then adopted in January came the advisory-based flood elevation maps that had, again, approximate zones of V-zone and used the simplified method, while contractors for FEMA were doing the analysis, the wave action analysis. FEMA was saying, look, these advisory maps are just that. I mean, FEMA was saying there are maps coming, and my advice to anyone, I was taking calls from various people on what do I do if you were in one of these marginal V-zone areas. I was saying you have to hold tight. You have to wait and see what the new mapping will show, and that, again, that has come out in the last what they're calling the preliminary work maps, which are the predecessor to the preliminary maps, which will again be that will be where communities get to comment on them. That will be coming you know, into the final maps in 2014. So, but yeah, there was a technical reason that the V zone slimmed down. It was a technical reason. The reason we have preliminary base maps, I think that was a political response to getting something out as quickly as possible. But the mapping itself, I believe, was not a political thing. That was very, very much a technical issue.
Any other questions via phone, or do you want to type something in chat? I'm going to guess one, while folks are contemplating that, one I have is, in any of the outreach forums that you've set up or been involved with post-Sandy, how has the discussion around the changes resulting from bigger waters, has that been a major factor with the public thus far, or how have you seen that play out?
It certainly has. People are very aware of bigger waters. People are making decisions. When I visited Highlands, which again is an interesting name for the town. Half of it is out of the floodplain, but a good portion of it is in the floodplain, but it's called Highlands. There's also a town just to the west called Atlantic Highlands. But anyway, Highlands is the real close to Sandy Hook, New Jersey, so the very northeast portion of the coast we're talking about. But there were a number of homes that were being elevated in that town, and this is before they may have gotten their flood insurance payments, but it certainly came out before any grant programs were issued for elevations, and a lot of people are doing elevations, and there's no doubt that bigger waters has been a driving force. I met a couple in the Atlantic City area when David Conrad and I were driving down the coast that absolutely did their elevation because of bigger waters. And they saw, they a plan to live in that home for the rest of their lives, and they want it to elevate. They did not want to be susceptible to flooding. Interesting enough, there's been, and again, I'm the legislative committee chair, so there's been some interesting things where even Senator Menendez from New Jersey was saying, well, I want to delay bigger waters, and I stressed with one of his staff members that I've been actually very associated with since a visit down to D.C. in 2007, but I was telling him it's having such a positive impact on Jersey's coast in rebuilding from Sandy. Please don't delay it. If you need to lengthen the phase-in time, I can go with that, but please don't delay it or get rid of it, because it is playing a serious role in the state.
One other question on chat here is, has there been a discussion about affordability of insurance and potential plans for relocation of homes that are priced out of the neighborhood due to the rise in insurance prices?
Yeah, there certainly has been a lot of talk about affordability, and again, that's something that I know ASFPM has been addressing, and I as representing NJAFM have been addressing with our elected officials. But yeah, certainly affordability. As far as relocations, and if that's a question on the mitigation sense in terms of structure relocation, a lot of these communities don't have another place to put a home. I mean, some of these, if you just zoom in on Google Earth into like Long Beach Island would be a good example. Zoom in. I mean, it's wall-to-wall development on that barrier island, and there's nowhere to really take a structure in terms of relocating people, the people and not the structure, and doing a buyout or something like that. There are different thoughts that go into a local official's or elected official's mind in terms of, are these people leaving our community? Are we losing some of our tax base? Are we losing, some of the people from our community? So yeah, that definitely comes into play in a lot of people's minds.
Another chat question was, were there any flood level projections available that took into account future sea level rise? And if so, how were they used?
Sea level rise is something that the state in New Jersey is not doing much with, but there are other groups doing things with. NOAA, along with it's the Jacques Cousteau. It's basically it's a group associated with Rutgers University in New Jersey, has a what they call the New Jersey Flood Mapper utility that you can basically look at what levels of additional sea level rise means to the inundation of certain areas. It even looks at photographs and superimposes flood elevations on those photographs. It's a great tool. There are other efforts, and definitely there are lots of people and lots of NGOs that are working on sea level rise in New Jersey, but the policy coming from the state itself is really not including sea level rise, and our state chapter is definitely saying that is insufficient for really calling something a resilient recovery. We think that's very absent from our recovery so far.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I think we're about out of time. I'd like to thank John Miller for volunteering his time and putting together today's presentation. If there are any participants that joined today's WebEx after the roll call, please send me a chat if you'd like your name submitted to ASFPM for continuing education credits. There's a slide up now showing some of our upcoming topics for the next two Lunch and Learns. Our next session is scheduled for October 4th and will be on the latest on NAI and the law, community liability, and the presenter is Samantha Medlock. We haven't pinned down the December presentation yet, but it will be on the 4th, some of the potential topics that we're looking at are integration of LID into NAI, as well as basic, better, and NAI enhanced examples from local communities. These lunch and learn topics were initially identified from our NAI Principles Community Survey of Georgia floodplain officials. However, we're always open to new ideas, topics, and presenters. So if you have an idea or would like to present on a NAI-related best practice or lessons learned from your community, please feel free to send me an email. I think we're ready to wrap up. Thanks for your time, and look forward to hearing from you in another month or so.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Micah.
Thank you.
All right.